he realized when he closed the jar that you couldn't tell. So he went to the boss and he said, look, he said, if we take out one olive, and you can't see that, we're going to save $1 million a month. One olive. Now, of course, the boss loved that. Yeah, fuck the people. Take out the olive. Have you ever seen tins of coffee? You know, all those tins are a standard size. 50 years ago, all those tins were filled to the brim. They still sell you the same tin, but every year there's less and less coffee in them. Same tin. And you know, they think that you're an idiot. And you are. You buy the same tin. You think you're getting the same amount of coffee. You're not. Go into any supermarket, look at the tins, and read at the bottom. You see very, very fine little print. Very, very fine little print. It will tell you exactly how much is inside because I have to according to the law. And then all the tins are the same size. They all have a different amount inside of them. You know, somebody had this suggestion. Hey, look, if we take a couple of spoons out, and we keep the same tin size, they're too stupid, they're not going to know. They don't care. But look how much money we save. See, I think that we should sell Ravy Chings with 4 or 5 hexagrams missing. They're too stupid to notice. There's always a good suggestion. Oh, Lord. Oh, I'm really all over the place today. Okay, the 40, I just was about to start talking about the 23. I mean, I have problems. I need to retire. I need rest. Rest and medication, you know? And I've been teaching almost continuously since the 2nd of February. I'm beginning to get dizzy, you know? What am I doing here? All right, the 43rd gate. It should be familiar to me. In order for achievement to be maintained, a new order must be fairly established. Ah, yes. This is very apropos of changes now in the world of human design. In order for achievement to be maintained, you know, I've given you all a nice mutation. In order for achievement to be maintained, a new order must be fairly established. If you come into the world as a freak, and I came into the world as a freak, you just want the world to be fair. Now we know it's not like that. It isn't. We know that it's not fair. We know the fates aren't fair. It's very important for me to see that the success of any structure, and the 4323 is the channel of structuring, the success of any structure is in its fairness. You know, I'm not somebody who's into equality, but I am somebody who's into fairness and correctness. And it's one of the things to recognize about any mutative process and being able to establish a mutative process. Remember that when you're dealing with, you're selling certainty here. And the only way that the new can be accepted as a certainty is that the mutation that it brings is just. In other words, it's a value to whoever it's being presented to in that sense. However, expediency is the theme. The powerful drive for regeneration that will, when breakthrough, when its insight is threatened, use any means, align with any force, and endure any condemnation to achieve its goal. It's very important to grasp this. And it is a deep oversensitivity to condemnation. Deep. Now this is me, this is my mind. I'm a 43-3-23-3. You know, it's like reading the inside of my, you know, my imprinting. I aligned with any force. I will endure any condemnation. I will deal with anything. You get in my way on my road and I will kill you if I must. It's the nature of the 4323. When it has a mutation, it will do everything in its power to deliver it. Everything. And it's one of the things to recognize about the new, is that sometimes to bring the new into the world, you have to do what's expedient. Remember that the 4323 is amoral. I am amoral. This is not about the good and the bad and the ugly. This is just about getting the new out. And to get the new out, you use any trick in your bag. Human design never would have had a chance if it weren't for the dope dealers who gave me money, who supported me, the gangsters that supported me, the so-called criminals that supported me in the early years. Expediency, I don't give a heck. It doesn't matter to me what somebody does. There is no choice. I'm only interested in spirit. I don't care what you do. It's not moral. It's not good or bad. There's no clean or dirty money to me. It's just energy. There's clean and dirty people. What to do? But in the name of what's new, recognize that the only way to bring the new out is you do whatever you have to. Whatever you have to. Whatever. Let's go to one of those deeply pleasant, wonderful and soothing gates that we have in human design. Let's go to the 47th gate, that sweet and delicious gate of oppression. Did I make it sound nice? A restrictive and adverse state as a result of internal weakness or external strengths or both. Shit, give me a break. Poor thing. Jesus. It's like, oh, well, okay. I don't have that. It's so nice to be selfish, I don't have that. I don't want that. But I will sell you getting rid of your oppression. I'm happy. I'm happy to help you with your confusion. Let me make you certain about what makes sense. Let me bring you to a certainty of what makes sense, and let me do that through reminding you how self-oppressed you are. Third line theme, the material theme, self-oppression. The conscious and well-integrated being whose natural right action will eventually come to see the unfoundedness of its oppression. The eventual realization that one is really okay. Now look, in the material sense, understand something. We're dealing with the human experiential way. We're dealing with the abstract process. That is the human life. We are all oppressed by the material plane. We are all oppressed by the material plane. And that the only way to move through confusion, the only way to make sense out of life, the only way to deal successfully on the material plane is through right action. It's the most beautiful thing about the theme of this 47th gate, is that it states very, very clearly, the conscious and well-integrated being. You really have to be clear in that. You have to be able to see yourself. You have to be able to deal with yourself. Whose natural right action, their natural right action, will eventually bring what they need. It will. It will. But it's the right action that matters. And it's one of the places where, I have my greatest pitch. Be correct. And that pitch of being correct, this is all about this gate. It's all about this gate. It's not behavior. It's not about the 10. It's not about the mechanics of being correct. It's about understanding that right action and only right action, that only right action is something that is going to heal you. And only right action gets rid of the oppression. And that oppression is the material plane. Get rid of the oppression of the material plane. You know, live your design, blah, blah, blah. Now you can also see that, you know, getting rid of oppression involves many things. It involves politics. It involves all kinds of things, not just simply the business plane. And at the personal level, it's something that's deeply difficult. But the secret lies in the right action, not in anything else. Jesus, I have to deal with my mind today. Youthful folly. The energy to beguile. Aren't I a good beguiler? I like that word. Eh? The energy to beguile and succeed despite ignorance. Eh? Freedom from retribution. Eh? I'm just a messenger, don't shoot me. You know? This is the great, I'm just a messenger, don't shoot me line. You know? I mean, really, here it is. You know, freedom from retribution. Okay. Formulas. I'm going to infuriate the technocrats now. Okay. Formulas. We know that the whole business of the fourth gate is to come up with answers, to come up with business answers, business formulas, success formulas, and again the selling of the certainty of those formulas, and all of it that goes with that. But you know, the third line is the line of irresponsibility. Formulas have a problem. And the general refusal to apply oneself diligently when one can get by with much less effort. With much less effort. Where art is more valued than the artist. The potential to enjoy the formulas with no regard to their practical application. And you see, this is really a problem, is that the nature of being is that we are synthetic. And it's one of my dilemmas about the nature of the running of any enterprise. Being a freak, I have my unique, irresponsible ways of running an enterprise. Yet at the same time, there are all kinds of formulas. Some of which logically I can look at and say, yeah, all right. You know, others I look at logically and my judgmental system goes, no. But the reality is that the formulas tend to take on disproportionate value. They are not about life. They're not. They're about trying to see patterns of how life will work. But they're not about life themselves, particularly in the business sense. You know, in the business sense, coming up with a formula, even though the formula is magical in its correctness, in the sense that the potential of the formula can be seen if everything is absolutely according to Hoyle, but human beings are irresponsible. And most of them don't give a shit. You know, for most of them, it's just a damn job, Jack. What do you mean you want me to do that? You know, and slowly the formulas get corrupted because life steps in. And this is the dilemma when the art is more important than the artist. You know? It's like, okay, here's what the pattern's going to be. But you see, if the formula lays out the pattern, who's going to paint it? The formula doesn't paint it. The people have got to paint it. The clients have got to paint it. The workers have got to paint it. You know, and if you don't see them, if you don't feel them, if you don't recognize what's there, human beings in a process, you know, then you're going to have to deal with a real shock because the formula, despite the fact that it works, and there you are scratching your head, you know, well, it should work. You know, 1 and 2 or 3. You know, but they didn't count on that emotional person that insisted it was 5. And wouldn't play ball and would cry because they wanted it to be 5. And they don't know how to deal with that. Well, it's not the formula. And the emotional person saying, fuck your formula. It's 5. It's not 3. And then you end up with all kinds of dilemmas because the problem is not that the formula wasn't valid. The formula was devoid of life. And this is one of the things about business plans. Business plans are all very nice, but they're rarely people plans. And they have to be both. They have to be both. It's one of the things you get to see in anything through this knowledge, is that you get to see the fundamental binary. It can't be one or the other. It has to be both of them that form something that's greater than the sum of its parts. That brings me to that wonderful, delicious gate that I'm so glad I don't have, the 24. I'm my 61, my unconscious personality son, my only activation in the head center, endlessly pointed, eternally pointed at the 24. Yes, well, the natural and spontaneous process of transformation and renewal. This is the addict. Third line theme of the 24, the addict. To return over and 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 over again. Keep on putting the needle in the body, keep on doing this, keep on doing that. I sell addiction. I am a great seller of addiction. It's called the human design virus. It goes into your body, you get addicted. You become addicted to numbers. You become addicted to centers and channels and gates. You become addicted to profiles. You become addicted. It's an addiction. It's what I sell. Don't suffer from it myself. But it's what I sell. And it tells you something about the nature of the new, is that it's an addiction. It's an addiction. Look, anything new coming into the world comes in on a fractal line for those that have been waiting for it. And it doesn't matter whether it's the hula hoop and your hips have been waiting for it for 18 generations of design bodies. It doesn't matter whether it's human design and it's going to change your life. The fact of the matter is, anything new comes into the world, there are forces waiting for it. They're just waiting. They're waiting to be addicted to it. I mean, look at some of the New Age stuff that's so really bizarre and out in the far, far edge of brain pan, and you have these addicts, they're addicted to it. They... I don't want to get into that. The powerful attraction of regressive forces. Deconditioners. One of the most important things about the new is that you've got to decondition your environment to get the new in. You got to say to them, look, having a guy come with a horse that shits on your front lawn to bring you ice that's going to melt in a day is really dumb. Why don't you buy a fridge, idiot? You plug it in, it's always cold, no horse patties, Anyway, the difficult but possible task of overcoming irrationality. And you see, if you're going to do a good job selling something new, you've got to sell it to the point that people become irrational. I'm going to go, as long as I want, Fuck off. Look, just calm down. You're being irrational. I think you're overdoing this. It's just another one of these things that you're addicted to. You were addicted to yoga boga. You were addicted to hoodoo. You're addicted to schmoot. It's another addiction. Stop that. You got a problem. It's you. No. The addict. Now, if you read the other side of this line, you really get the joke. Okay? It's a wonderful joke. It says, addiction and regression legitimized by success. Isn't that wonderful? It's like me smoking dope in public all these years, Nobody cares. Nobody cares. It's like being crazy. I've been crazy all these years. You fools, I'm a madman. Nobody cares. He's a success. He's eccentric now. He's been legitimized by success. And you see, when you bring that new thing in, you have a chip stapled to the side of your head, and you're addicted to it. And after a while, when everybody is putting these chips stapled into your head, you become a hero. And they're all addicted to it. How nice. And you see, you don't have to be smart, but it's really helpful to be mad. Hey? Give me that mad scientist that comes up with super glue. I love them. It's wonderful. So the whole thing about bringing in the new is that it helps to have a touch of idiosyncrasy. And the whole thing about bringing something out collective is to be as bland as toast. No butter, no jam. Thank you very much. Let's have a break. When we're dealing with the emotional system, obviously for 50% of humanity, the emotional system is the authority. And for the other 50% of humanity who have the solar plexus center open, the solar plexus center is the center of authority. So when we're dealing with the emotional system, we're obviously dealing with one of the most important money-making centers of all. And basically it's about the selling of pleasure. It's about selling the pleasure, and whether that pleasure is food, whether that pleasure is sex, whether it's the pleasure of desire or the pleasure of passion or the pleasure of needs. It's all about selling pleasure. And it's about selling pleasure as something that can be consistent. Remember that in dealing with the emotional wave, we know that the regret of all emotional people is not that they have emotions when they're up, but they have emotions when they're down. And all of them want to get rid of the emotions they have when they're down. And all of them go looking for pleasure when they're down in their wave. And there's a vast market that's out there to sell you pleasure. Vast. Okay. We know what the strategy is of the open emotional system. The strategy is to avoid confrontation and truth. So 50% of humanity avoids confrontation and truth. And the other 50% are too fucked up emotionally to care. So we really have a problem when it comes to truth, obviously. So one of the great pleasures that is sold through the open emotional system is truth. Haven't I done a good job giving you pleasure through truth? It's one of the great pitches of human design, is how pleasant it is to understand how things work. The pleasure of being able to recognize one's nature and so forth and so on. Okay. I'm going to start with the 30th gate, and we're going to start with one of my favorites. Freedom recognizes an illusion and limitation accepted as a fate. This is the great gate of the fates. It's written right at the top. One of the great gates. And, this is one of the things that separates the logical process from the abstract process. In the logical process, if you do this, this, and that, you get there. And in the abstract process, you do this, that happens, and you don't get there, have a crisis, and end up at the other side of something else. In other words, that even though the abstract would like to be logical, it's not. And this is one of the dilemmas of abstract people, is that abstract people actually expect that their expectations will be fulfilled. In other words, they expect if they do this, that, and the other thing, that they're going to get to wherever they're going to, and of course the fates are always going to stand in the way. In dealing with the 38th gate, we also have to deal with something else. The 30th gate. This is about life. And so the 30th gate is the way in which the fates interfere with the material life. The way in which the fates interfere. You've got this great idea, and you just can't get it together, and your next door neighbor in his garage does. The fates can be cruel. So one person ends up inventing, Microsoft, and the other person ends up working as a technician in a lab because they didn't get it together soon enough, or didn't get it out soon enough, or whatever, or blah, 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 blah. There's so many scientific stories of people that were on the verge, because it's all in the program, who were on the verge of discovering something, and something got in the way, and somebody else discovered it. And the person who discovered it got all the benefits, got all the blah, 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 and, well, it was called the 4F Club when I was a kid. Fucked by the fickle finger of fate. I mean, look out. You never know. You never know. And of course, it's one of the basic things to understand about, entering into life on the material plane, is that, your expectations are just that, expectations, but they're not guarantees. They're not. I have told students over again that the 30th gate is important in that it gives us an archetype for the way in which our profiles are designed to respond to life experience. So for example, I'm a fifth line being, that is, I've got a fifth line personality. So who I think I am, and this is the context of this example, who I think I am deals with the world through irony. And this is my theme. Everything to me about life is ironic. If the fates get in my way, for me, there's always an irony in that. There's an irony in everything. There's an irony in the way in which my father lived and died. There's an irony in everything for me, because that's what I resonate to. If you're a third line being in your profile, you're going to deeply resonate to this, but at the same time to understand that the whole world of living on the material plane is conditioned by this, and it's conditioned by resignation. Now that carries a lot of values, particularly in the material plane. Resignation, is something that is, the pulling out, the closing of the door. But if you look at the line says, the acceptance of what is. The acceptance of what is, the awareness and manifestation of the law of regeneration, the laws of karma, reincarnation, and resurrection. Wow, it's a very spiritual line. And it's one of the things to understand is that it's talking about your geometry, your role, your character. It's saying it's going to be what it's going to be according to your nature. According to your nature, and you better be resigned to it. I am resigned to the fact that I can only do things in my unique way. That is very, very clear to me. I also recognize the laws of karma, the laws of resurrection. I know all these movies. And it's one of the things to see very clearly that on the human experiential way, there's more involved in your fate than what's on the surface of your life. And whether you're going to succeed on the material plane or not has a lot to do with who's on your fractal line, not from this time, but the last, or the one before, or the one before that. There are many, many mystical things on this road. My whole process is the recognition of the fractal. Nothing about human design would have been possible if it stayed alone as a seed within me, and it was only going to be taken in, and my aura was only going to be accessible to very, very few people. Over 16 years of my work in human design, despite how far it's reached in terms of its availability, my aura, very limited, very limited. And it's one of the things that I have to accept, that limitation. I never had an expectation that I was going to stand in a room and there would be 1,000 people. I never had that expectation. I accept my karma. I'm a transpersonal being. I accept what it is to be resurrected in this life as something else. I accept what it is to have an incarnative role. I accept the limitation of what I am, because the limitation of what I am, I cannot go beyond what I'm designed for. I'm not designed to be a manager. I can't have the expectation that I'm going to get there. If I do, I got a problem. And one of the great things about dealing with the life is about the acceptance of what is, what you are, what is. And again, that's not intellectual. It never is within the context of design. It's a byproduct of correctness. The byproduct of correctness is that you are resigned to your limitation. It's easy to be resigned to the limitation. And if you're not, you're going to fail. If you are not equipped to get to the expectation, you're not going to get there. You're not. No matter what you buy. And guess what they sell here? You can go beyond your limitation. We can dress you up. You desire to be the top. We'll help you get there. We'll do it for you. We'll help you go past the roadblock of the fates. This story of the king who calls in his soothsayer, and the soothsayer says, "Oh, I got bad news for you. You're going to die tomorrow." And the king gets all upset. He said, "What do you mean I'm going to die tomorrow?" He said, "Well, you are. You're going to die tomorrow. You're going to be killed." He said, "Well, what can I do about it?" The soothsayer said, "What do you mean, what can you do about it? You're going to die tomorrow." The king gets really pissed. So the king goes ahead and gets rid of all his fancy clothes and puts on peasant's clothes, sneaks out of the castle, disappears into the countryside, finds an abandoned hut in the night, goes into the hut and goes to sleep. There's a storm, lightning strikes the tree falls on the hut, the king is dead. No matter what you try, you cannot escape your fate. No matter what you do, you cannot. It's like people who want to push the river. Relax, relax, don't push the river. There's a time for everything. For everything. And there is a person for everything in its uniqueness. There's the right thing, there's the correct action, there's all of that stuff. Anyway, don't mess with the fates. Not a good idea. All right, let's go to the 55, and abundance is strictly a question of spirit. The 55 isn't interested in making money. Has no interest in making money. The greatest lesson of my process was when I had nothing. And I didn't lose my dignity, and I didn't lose my grace. I felt very rich. I felt rich in a way I never imagined possible. I didn't lack for anything. I obviously survived it. And having grown up in the depths of Western culture, and having grown up with privilege, I recognized that the spirit of my poverty was more beautiful than any spirit I had met in wealth. I mean, it was magical. I felt so rich. It's not that I would go back there now. This is the mundane plane. But there is a change that takes place in the being. My relationship to money is very different now. It isn't that I don't need it. We all need it. I have a family, all of these things. But the reality is that it isn't alive for me in the sense that it's a power anymore. Money stopped being a power for me when I had nothing. I realized that it bought nothing, that it had no real power. And no matter how I live now, all of it can dissolve into a dream overnight, and I could end up back on a hill, and I would still be very rich and feel wonderful. And this is the whole nature of spirit. We're going to have a deep transformation in our spirit. We know now that the 55th gate is ruled by the emotional system. We know that this codon, that histidine, is a mutative force. We know the 55th gate is going through deep transformation. My long discussions about, autistic children, prostate cancer, all of these things that we're seeing in epidemic proportions now, this mutation physically at work in the world, a deep transformation that's taking place. And that transformation is going to change our romance with lucre, our romance with money, our romance with riches. It's going to change the romance. We're finally going to get the spirit. And by the way, it's not that it's going to change our relationship to it. Those children that are born, who will not be able to digest or even hold meat in their body, they will have a different material consciousness. They will have a different relationship to the material plane. One of the most extraordinary things to understand about the nature of the penta is that the penta in humanity is dysfunctional. And that human beings do not have access in their personality consciousness to integration with the consciousness or the process of the penta itself, other than through mechanics. And yet the nature of rave children is that rave children will operate naturally as pentas. And the one thing to recognize in the penta is that it is only the penta that carries the dream. In our dysfunctional pentas, our dream of well-being, and well-being associated with being able to look after the family because it's the genetic responsibility, that dream will be transformed, and as such, the materialness will be transformed. The way they will be material is very different than the way that we are material. Funny about the third line of the 55, innocence. It's I think it's the only line that has a quote as a heading. It says here, I was only following orders, is a genuine defense. A funny line. This idea of following orders, that if you're following orders, you're culpable. In other words, you're guilty. If you follow the orders to put people in gas chambers, you're guilty. And their response is, well, I was only following orders. Here is a case where following orders is a genuine defense. A genuine defense. When the form is correct and attempts at actualization have been disciplined and within guidelines, failure cannot be personally attributed. The emotional possibility to recognize that despite one's best efforts, failure is possible and does not need to affect the spirit. It's the spirit. You remember this guy that wrote the book, I'm Okay, You're Okay? I don't know his name, but anyway. I love that. It's one of the best comments I've ever made on an airplane. I had a woman who spent, 3 hours of a transatlantic flight sitting beside me, and I could feel that she just wanted to ask me something, this energy. And finally I sort of gave her attention. I turned to her and she said to me, what do you do? And I said to her, I tell people it's okay. And I shut up. You know, and I went back to reading my magazine. And she never talked to me again, which is a good thing. It is all okay. I mean, it really is. If you're okay, it's okay. You know, if you're correct, it's all okay. If you're not correct, it's not okay. But it's really meant to be okay. I mean, you're meant to be normal. Normal. Normal is okay. Abnormal is a drag. So it's about the spirit. And the whole thing about the spirit of the way in which we operate in the world is that if we don't have failures, there isn't growth. You see over and over again in all these third lines I'm describing to you is adapt, fail, adapt, fail, adapt, fail. Abisa. Oh, how I love Abisa. But if you really want to understand that program, you go and live on this island for a year, and you go into Abisa town, and you go and look at all the shops. And you look at all the shops. And summertime is coming, and every place is a shop. And summertime ends, and slowly they close. Some close saying they'll be back next year. Some close and you don't know they were even there. You know, and sure enough, as springtime comes, they all fill up again. And every once in a while they stay. You know, for the 10 that fail, there's one that stays. I mean, the real world of enterprise is a world of failure. It really is. A world of failure, of minimal profit, of struggle. I mean, come on, let's be real and look at the world for what it is. And you have to see that this is what plagues the spirit. I mean, it really does. You know, avoiding the truth. Avoiding the truth. You know, the truth is that if failure matters to you, success is never going to be yours. It's not. I have never, ever considered failure. I mean, yeah, sure, it might not work, but I don't think about that. That's not the point. And if it doesn't work, so what? You know, I did my best. The voice said, go out and tell the story. Okay. And you know, I've only been following orders. That's what I do. You know, all right, I'll do that. And if it doesn't work, if people think that I'm just a lunatic, well, okay, I tried. I did the best that I could. That's all you can do. I mean, that's the real spirit. See, this thing to understand about third line beings, I have this deep, you know, my 2 third line boys. I care deeply that their spirit is not damaged by trial and error. I care for their spirit. It's okay to fail. It's okay to fall down. It's okay. It's okay. It's all right. It doesn't matter. And it doesn't. And it doesn't. And you know, for me, this is the real spirit. If you have this spirit, you're not putting energy into defense mechanisms. You know, how am I going to save myself from a crash landing? You know, these are people who in cusp positions in what they are doing bail out. You know, it's like, well, it's probably going to, third line pessimism. I'm probably not going to be able to do it. It's probably not going to be able to work. It's probably the spirit, the fears. You know, and this is the whole point. For us, if there's no choice, 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 there's no choice. Why fight no choice? This is insane. You know, you may have a choiceless geometry of bankruptcies. Enjoy them. Each one. All the way. Each one. You know. Love it or leave it, you know? Be in there. Because only when you give your very best, and giving your very best is not looking over your shoulder. It's not. You see what individuality asks for. It asks for addiction. It asks for fighters and strugglers. It asks for those that will align with any force, will put up with anything. You can only do that if you've got the spirit. To really have an adventure in the movie. The 28:3, the mirror of this, speaks of that. It's an adventure. Shit, if you go on an adventure and you die, so what? That's what they're for. You go out there, you don't know, well, this is exciting, let's do it, You got to have the spirit. And if it all blows up and if it all falls apart, you're designed to stand again. You will not escape that. You cannot burrow into a hole and disappear. You're not going to hide. You're going to have to stand up and deal with your creditors. I did the best I could. All right, let's get to the nasty stuff. 49th gate. Ideally, the transformation, I love that. Ideally, you talk about a great emotional gate, right? Ideally, the transformation of forms based on the highest principles and not simply for power. Which means that most of the time, it's transformation for power that may have principles attached. This is, I own the cow, you can have a piece, do what I say. There is nothing rougher and tougher than the 49. I am a mean son of a bitch if you crank my emotional system. My 49 stands up there. It will carve you to pieces. Eat you for dinner. The 49 is the butcher. It's the butcher. It's the one that decides who gets to sit at the table and eat. Who gets to share what? Now, nobody in their right mind wants to deal with that kind of energy. We did it for millennia. We were always afraid of these people, right? Always have to, do we obey you, we do what you say, you give us our share. Okay. The general that takes his army into battle, and you win, and then you gather all the loot, and you bring all the loot into the general's tent. And the general says, that one's a good warrior, come here, I give you this. And you over there, I give you this. To buy loyalty, to guarantee obedience. It's called profit sharing. Profit sharing. But I'm the boss, and you obey me, blah, blah, blah. Okay, how do you make money? How do you make money with that kind of configuration? And remember that the open emotional system is about avoiding confrontation or truth. So you're not going to want to confront that force that can provide you with your bread and butter as long as you do it on their terms. Remember, the tribe's heavy. And when you're dealing with this side of the tribe, you're dealing with the communist, socialist, communalist format, where some are more equal than others. And all of that is based on one thing, the third line, popular discontent. Take advantage of popular discontent. It's my revolution, and I'm a revolutionary. Popular discontent. You're tired of being not selves, at least some of you. Popular discontent. Overthrow the morality, overthrow the religions, overthrow the science. Tear it all down. I'm a great anarchist. Tear it all down. Build something new. Build this And not only that, I'm really generous. I give you all a piece. If you're good and you're loyal. You know? It's a movie. It's always the same movie. You know, you look at people that have real power in the world, you're going to find 49s everywhere. 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 And they get to power through selling discontent. The ability to destroy antiquated forms once the restrictions have been removed. The potential and sensitivity to reject failed principles or relationships. The Pluto in detriment. With general support, a savageness in eliminating the old order that may permanently scar the new, an insensitivity in rejection and rejecting. Heavy stuff. Boy, does it make a lot of money. You know, think about it. The selling of revolutions, the selling based on discontent. Are you tired of that same old cigarette, dress, husband, dog, life? Have you had enough? Let us give you something that will give you contentness, pleasure. Pleasure. Oh, you poor, starving peasants. You're so unhappy. Life is so cruel to you. We can change that. Let's have a revolution. You know? Popular discontent. And the moment that you look out in the world with a material eye, wherever you see popular discontent, popular unhappiness, you're seeing a place to make money. It's amazing. And it's everywhere. Because they're all discontent. It's all not self. It's easy to sell revolutions. It's so easy to get people to be loyal. It's kind of gross, actually. You know, material loyalty. You know, material loyalty. This is not about the spirit. This is about money. You know, I pay you, you do what I say. That's the 49-19 relationship. Love, honor, and obey. You know, you flirt with me, okay, now you got me. Now that you've got me, you do what I say. And you stop flirting with everybody else. You know, and this is one of the oldest infrastructures of the clan and the business model. I am paying for your loyalty. Saddam tried that. Didn't work. Never works. Okay, the 36th gate. Let's see what we have to deal with here. Of course, this is the natural way in which the ongoing life process is at work. This is the human experiential way. The 36th, the heading, the rule of cycles, in which decline is a natural but not enduring stage. Now think about the emotional wave. When you're going into decline, there is a fear that it is an endless, bottomless pit that it's going to go into. And there is this extraordinary relief when it begins to move upwards. You know, this movement. It is one of the things to understand about the experiential way, is that the experiential way is the same as an orgasm. It's the same. There is this delicious build-up, but there is always decline. You get to the point, there's always a peak in that point, and after that there is the decline. There is an emptiness, there is a fall, until that energy can build again. And it's one of the things to understand about the life cycle, is the life cycle is full of peaks and valleys. We do live in an emotionally generated environment. The emotional system is part of the pattern of the world, and the natural rise and fall is part of it. Civilizations rise and fall. Business cycles rise and fall. Stock values rise and fall. It goes on and on and on. It is natural. Now, what you're selling here is you're selling no decline. You're never going to decline. Here it is. It's going to be perfect. It's never going to fail. You know, this is what I call the huckster gate. You know, a huckster is somebody who shows up in your village, opens up the back of their van, and in there is stuff in bottles that they say cures everything. Cures AIDS, cancers, you know, you name it, whatever you've got, it's going to cure you. And they stand up there and they give their pitch and people come and buy it. I mean, they buy it. And of course, all you've got inside of there is 2% alcohol, you know, and watercoloring. And it's like people who sell, well, I better watch myself here. But anyway, there's all of these new agey things, you know, that they sell. You know, bottles filled with shit. And, you know, this bottle is different than that bottle. And there's always some idiot that says, I'm blue, I'm blue, I'm blue. It's the gate of crisis. Decline creates crisis. You know?